Hi guys, this is Hadi Achai, bite of Iran. Wow, something amazing happened last night at the Oval Office. The meeting between Zelensky and Trump was unprecedented. The way it turned out, oh my God, it had some huge ripple effects across the world, especially Europe. I'm gonna dive into it and, together we're gonna analyze what happened. It was huge. A lot of people may argue that, Zelensky was the loser in this meeting, but I think he achieved what he wanted. He united Europe as a, united front against Russia and to some extent Trump. We saw what came out from, out of the mouth of European leaders from Italy, Germany, UK, France, in support of Zelensky after this meeting. So we're going to see some turning points moving forwards because it did not go well for Trump. I tell you that. Even though some people say Zelensky was humiliated, I don't think that's the case. So the date was February 28th, just to write it down. We don't mess up with any other meeting. February 28th, 2025, Zelensky met with Trump inside the Oval Office, right? So at first glance, it looked like the meeting was a simple diplomatic visit, focused on economic agreements, specifically uh, Zelensky signing away the mineral rights to the U.S. and some other rights that Trump talked about before, and also agreeing to concessions over the territory lost to Russia. But beneath the surface, this was a high stakes political maneuver that Zelensky very intelligently planned and disrupted basically Trump's plans. Kind of strengthened, as I said, European unity and left Russia kind of stunned because Russia also thought this would be over soon. So this is gonna, if Zelensky doesn't sign the agreement with Trump anytime soon, the war with Russia is gonna drag on for some time. So Zelensky played a brilliant strategic game, and Trump now faces a difficult balancing act as he struggles to achieve his plans that he hoped for. Uh, he also is managing America's economic and geopolitical constraint, which is, you know, getting really tough for him. It's not as easy as he thought it would be, or as he portrayed it to be, that I'm going to sign some executive orders and everything's going to be, going as plans. Because one of the things is that Trump doesn't have time. Trump is very constrained with what's going on inside the US, what he wants to achieve. He has Russia, he has China, he has Iran, he has Europe, he has Canada, Panama. He wants to achieve all of this, and he doesn't have enough time. And so therefore he has to do everything very quickly. That's why he wanted to sign with Putin so quickly. And he agreed over, what's shocked a lot of people. So Zelensky walked into that meeting fully aware of Trump's vulnerabilities. Trump is desperate for foreign policy victories, right? So far he hasn't achieved anything. I mean, no one's expecting him to achieve anything in the first. It's been so how long? Less than 2 months he's in the office, but he wants to achieve. He wants to show victory because his position and the way he promised to the voters, he has to achieve victories very quickly. Whether that means like the ending the Ukraine war or securing a deal with Putin or cutting US spending in Europe, any of that would be somehow a victory, right? But Zelensky flipped the script. He knew that, I mean, in the meeting, it seems like he knew what he was doing. Uh, the strategic deception that kind of Zelensky played. Uh, the public reason for Zelensky's visit was to negotiate the sale of mineral rights, something that plays into Trump's business-focused mindset. I mean, everybody says Trump is a businessman. Trump is not politically smart. Trump is not. But in my opinion, Trump is pretty smart. He's politically aware. He's not just throwing out cards regarding Panama, Canada, Greenland. He's, playing them very in a smart way that, might surprise you. So the real goal of Zelensky was to block Trump's plan from making a quick deal with Putin. Okay, and I think he achieved that. He's not going to be able to reach that deal with Putin in a in the near future. He also kind of politically cornered Trump, um, ensuring by ensuring that this meeting was high profile. Uh, Zelensky boxed Trump into a corner where he couldn't publicly undermine Ukraine without serious political backlash, both from European allies and from factions in Washington that still see Russia as a threat. So, by Trump agreeing to have this broadcast live, he kind of played into Zelensky's plan. So, Trump, because of his ego, and he kind of wanted to show what's going on with him and Zelensky, and he, hoped for the best, maybe planned for the best as well. He agreed to broadcast this live. Um, so that kind of put Trump in a disadvantage with what Zelensky did. I mean, if Zelensky signed everything over to Trump, then yeah, would be a victory for Trump. But right now, it's a different story. Strengthening European unity, that's you know, another thing that Zelensky won over, and that's he kind of made a move that forced Europe's hand. They now see that Ukraine is still in the fight with what he said in the meeting, making it harder for them to walk away. So if Europe thought, oh, Ukraine is over, they're gonna give up, then Europe would be easy. You cannot just come fight for you. You have to keep fighting, and we help you. But right now, Zelensky said, we are fighting. We want your help. So Europe has to do something about it. Rather than allowing Trump to pressure Ukraine into a weak deal, Zelensky turned the situation on its head. And now he's going to rally European nations to stand firmer against Russia. Now, what happens now is Russia also is left is stunned as much as Trump was stunned. So Moscow expected Trump to start cutting off U.S. support for Ukraine and pushing for a peace like settlement that would have favored Putin. But right now we have a different story. Instead, Zelensky disrupted those plans, ensuring the war would continue and that European support would not stop or weaken in any way. So this wasn't just a diplomatic visit, it was a calculated power play. Uh, it also was a gamble by Zelensky, but I think it worked. Trump walked into the meeting expecting to take control, but Zelensky played him instead. So, what is Trump's main problem? You have to listen carefully because Trump's problem is that he doesn't have enough time, he doesn't have enough options, and he has no clear wins so far. So he threw out these plans that he kind of looked like a madman when he took office. But right now he hasn't gained any wins, and he doesn't have enough time to gain those victories, and he doesn't have enough options. Trump uh, came into this meeting under immense pressure. You have to realize that and notice that. The national debt of the United States is $36 trillion. That's that's a huge number. I mean, no other country comes even close to this. Trump's plan, I mean, U.S. has a very high military cost that Trump wants to cut, right? One of the ways he wants to cut it is, cut the aid to Ukraine. And he also needs a very quick foreign policy win before 2026. So he doesn't have a lot of time. So his goals, I mean, it's nothing. If you remember the first term that he did this meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, I think that's his name. He didn't win anything, but he did win the spotlight at least. He gathered a lot of attention on himself. But this time is different. He has to win some real wins in terms of foreign policy. Now, his Trump's goals are clear. Number one, he has to end the war in Ukraine pretty quickly. Trump does not want to continue sending billions in aid to Ukraine. He needs Ukraine to make a deal with Russia very quickly. He also wants to make a deal with Putin. Trump likely wants a settlement that lets the US pivot away from Europe and focus on China and trade negotiations. That's his main plan. So his main goal is control China, which is taking over the US in terms of the economic power. And if the US doesn't do anything about it, along with Europe, China is gonna take over. His next plan is to pressure Iran. Trump wants to weaken Iran while securing better leverage in the West Asian region. So that's his third goal. So Zelensky, with his power move, made all three harder. How? Instead of weakening Ukraine's position to reach a deal, Zelensky right now made it stronger. That's for sure. No one can deny this. With what panned out across the world, especially Europe. We know Zelensky in a better position now that he was before the meeting. Now, instead of Europe moving towards peace talks, they are now more unified against Russia, right? We can also see that through the comments from the European leaders. Now, instead of Russia gaining leverage, Putin now has to fight an even longer war, maybe even another year. If this war drags on for another year, it's a huge win for Ukraine. Trump walked into the meeting expecting a business deal and walked out with more complications. And they have to figure out how to respond to this kind of a political disaster. So Trump is in a difficult position. His quick win strategy has backfired, and he needs a way to regain control of the situation that he's in. Here, some possible next moves for Trump. Number one, he could increase pressure on Ukraine. He may double down the pressure on Ukraine and threatening to withhold military aid until Zelensky shows flexibility in negotiation with Russia. But after this meeting, Zelensky has European backing, so it's going to be hard to do that for Trump. Trump's next option is to pivot away from Ukraine to focus on China and West Asia. If Trump sees, Ukraine as a lost cause, for instance, he may shift his focus toward a deal with China or pressuring Iran instead to, achieve that foreign policy victory that he hopes for. He could try to disengage from Ukraine altogether or, framing it as a European problem while pivoting U.S. strategy elsewhere. He could do a back channel negotiation with Russia as his third option. Since Trump now obviously cannot publicly abandon Ukraine without backlash, he may start working behind the scenes to negotiate a settlement between Kiev and Moscow. He could, go through intermediaries like India, Brazil, or even Saudi Arabia or Turkey. So his fourth option would be rebuilding domestic political support. So what he has to do is try to shift the narrative at home, selling his America First policy as a reason to reduce US investment in Ukraine. That's what he could do, or he could rally support for cutting European military spending, blaming the US economic crisis as a reason to focus on domestic issues. So we have to see what option he will pick or what route he will take. Now, the big question mark is how Europe is going to react. That would be a potential turning point. I mean, we saw their statements from different European leaders. They all kind of supported Zelensky and kind of pushed away Trump's reaction. But how they react, in terms of policy, could be a different story. We know that for years Europe has struggled with internal division on how to handle Russia. Because European Union is kind of diverse, and the Europe in general is diverse in terms of how to deal with Russia. But this meeting might have forced them to unify. European nations now see that Ukraine is still fighting. That statement that Zelensky made to J.D. Vance, and he said, "We are fighting. Have you visited Ukraine?" And then J.D. Vance response was, "Have you thanked the U.S. for their support?" Uh, that was big for Zelensky, and J.D. Vance's comeback wasn't good. Have you thanked Trump? Have you thanked the U.S.? What he meant, Zelensky, what he meant was that we are fighting. We are our men are dying on the front, so we're still standing. Even though maybe in a weaker position, but we're still standing. Um, so Zelensky's move made it politically harder for Europe to retreat. If he signed away, as I said, he signed away and then kind of surrendered to Trump's pressure, then yes, Europe say, okay, we can fight for you, and if you put down the arms, if you're still fighting, we have to do something about it. More united Europe means more resistance to Russian influence. This could be the moment where Europe stops relying on US leadership and starts taking independent actions on Ukraine. So we have to see if that's the route Europe is going to take. If that happens, it shifts the entire geopolitical landscape entirely, and that might be a turning point for where Europe and US is going to go separate ways. We have to see how. So how this benefits, Iran, or China. From an Iranian perspective, uh, these developments could be a net positive. We have a potentially prolonged Ukraine war, which weakens both Russia and the West. This could, leave Iran more freer to pursue its regional ambitions. The U.S. remains distracted by Ukraine. It still has to keep an eye on Ukraine. Trump is now forced to juggle multiple crises, and it would be harder to focus on Iran. And China and the U.S. stay locked in economic conflict. As long as these two are fighting trade wars, Iran can continue strengthen its economic ties with China, because China would need Iran more if there was no conflict between the US and China. And the Middle East remains the Middle East, West Asia. I always refer to Middle East as West Asia because that would be a more accurate term to describe the region rather than Middle East. East of where? Where is East? And Far East, Middle East, West. Who's the center here? But if you say West Asia, you're talking about Asia and then west of Asia. Okay. So now West Asia remains unstable. That would limit Israel's strategic flexibility. The longer this chaos continues, the more time Iran has to expand its influence. For Iran, the ideal scenario would be more distraction for the US, more fractures in the Western alliance, and probably a prolonged war. I mean, that also could be different, could turn out differently for Iran, but generally speaking, a prolonged war would benefit Iran. So that going back to this meeting, in terms of who won this meeting, you know, for Zelensky, it was a huge win. He trapped Trump, he cornered Trump, strengthened Ukraine's position, and ensured Europe stays united. Trump, major setback. He wanted a quick Ukraine deal, but got dragged deeper into the conflict. I mean, it was also his mistake too. You know, what he offered to Zelensky was basically nothing. Uh, he was basically saying, okay, Ukraine, give me all your minerals, uh, right for me to, build your infrastructure, give your land to Russia, and you're left with nothing. Uh, you know that if you corner a cat in the street, instead of uh, fleeing, he's gonna fight back. The cat is gonna fight back and maybe scratch you. So I think the reaction was by Zelensky was predictable. If he had a little bit of common sense in terms of how he would react, he would not just say, "Okay, yeah, let me sign over." If he had a little bit of Ukrainian blood in him, which it looks like he did, um, he would never sign that deal. He would just, fight back like he did. At least to some extent, this was expected. And only some people with some, uncontrolled ego would assume that, okay, the leader of Ukraine would come and sign everything over to Russia and US and go back home and be welcomed with tomatoes and egg by his own people. He would not gonna do that. I think right now even he might go back to Ukraine and be welcomed as a hero. So we'll see. But this was expected by Zelensky. I think Trump's problem is that he has a huge ego, and he sometimes oversimplifies things, and he expects people to just give in and listen to whatever he says. Um, I think if he wants to do better politically, he has to be more realistic. It's not the same thing as a business deal, that where you have a lot of money and people would bend head over heels to listen to you because you have all the money. But right now it's different. It's politics, and I think he'll learn this as he stays in the office more, as Zelensky learned, because Zelensky was also uh, he was an actor, he was a comedian, and in the beginning he didn't know what he was doing, but right now he's learned because politics kind of cooks you. It takes time to get well done and be ready for politics. And Trump's might go through the same route to learn the hard realities of politics, which is different. And I don't think Trump is just a businessman or a madman. He's playing very smart. All of his plans that he suggested, uh, if he implements them correctly, are very beneficial to the U.S. But except the ones that benefit Israel, the ones that benefit Israel for the most part, I think he's going to hunt back the U.S. Um, and he's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. He also did the same thing with Iran's kind of united when the letter from Trump to Iran was revealed, the content of it. Many people that supported negotiations with the US, they're against it now because they say, "What is this? Is not a normal negotiation. This is you're humiliating Iran, and uh, negotiating under these circumstances, agreeing to the circumstances, is insane for any country." The fact that he assumed that Iran would sign or come talk with the US under these circumstances was insane. So he has to deflate the ego a little bit to be more successful. Um, so for Europe, who in terms of who won this meeting, Russia is stunned after this meeting. Putin expected Trump to start cutting off Ukraine, but now the war might last even longer. For Europe, it can be a potential turning point if they truly unite. This war could escalate into a bigger, prolonged geopolitical struggle. So we'll have to see. Bottom line, Zelensky just pulled off a major geopolitical maneuver, and he played it very smart. And potentially it could have huge consequences for the whole world. He kind of played Trump. He did not sign over. I mean, not yet, at least. Maybe he signs them over tomorrow or the day after. But so far, he hasn't signed. He rallied Europe. He kept Ukraine in the fight. The world is still in flux. The next moves from Washington, Moscow, and Tehran, and Beijing, and Europe, and Belgium, Brussels, would shape the future balance of power. Um, yeah, I think Zelensky was, did a. I think it was also a gamble for him, but I think he pulled it off really nicely, and we'll see how it turns out. And for my audience is, share this video with your friends who are interested in this topic. You like and subscribe, like this video, because that helps with other people find this video. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. You are awesome for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was useful for you, and stay tuned. Take care, and